So, Nancy, give me 30 seconds. Tell the audience who you are, what you're from, where you're from, and what's your favorite Pitbull song I just played.
Well, I'll start with the Pitbull song because I think that Green Light song, whatever it was, I thought it would be great to do a
It hits you at the
Peloton
heart,
class to
doesn't it?
that song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and where am I from? I'm located out of the Greenville, South Carolina area. I'm currently the Chief Marketing Officer for First Franklin Financial. Spent my career in leading marketing teams for products and services for First Franklin most recently. Prior to that, Spectrum, Time Warner Cable, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Wachovia, First USA Bank One. So nice little spectrum of industries and lots of really great marketing experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. You went over your 30 seconds, but we won't hold that against you. So, yeah. Natalie, tell us, introduce where you live, where you're from, and then where you're working today.
Absolutely. I don't get the Pitbull song question because I was
What's your
thinking
favorite
about that
song?
Favorite Pitbull song obviously is Fireball because nobody can quite compare to the lyrical genius that is I'm on fire ball.
Thank you. Yes, exactly.
It's a classic. Natalie Huff, the VP of Marketing for Miracle-Ear. I've been with Miracle-Ear and Amplifone Americas for about 5 years. Prior to that, I was working for Zenfolio, which was at that point in time a startup, but software as a subscription for professional photographers, some agency time before that. My world has been around digital for quite a bit of time. And so I'm very excited to have this conversation today in terms of digital marketing and performance marketing and where it's going and how we can make the most of
it. The topics du jour, if you will. Running marketing for these two big brands. There's no pressure under marketing whatsoever, right? It's been a very stable environment, nothing to worry about. A little bit. It's really how we started off the show. We were talking about data and privacy. There's so much going on with GDPR, TCPA. GDPR does affect you in the States the same way, but it's leading education and conversation a lot with TCPA. Now you've got laws in Virginia and everywhere else coming up. There's so much going on with data and privacy. Our last speaker just spoke about, and Apple again is moving towards this cookieless world. Natalie, I'll start with you. How do you look at how to manage all the things going on with privacy today? Because this is really a massive movement.
Absolutely.
We believe it's come in a strong way.
You're absolutely right. So the world without cookies, right, has been a topic of discussion for quite a few years, and many vendors are approaching it differently. You have the federated learning of cohorts from Google and mobile marketing that's been cookieless for quite some time. But from the standpoint of where marketing is actually going, is we're really going to need to make a shift towards contextual targeting and first-party data as we continue to grow and expand. And honestly, I believe that the current legislation that we have out there is fairly toothless in terms of actually making an impact on consumer privacy, just due to the fact that legislation tends to be a little bit behind of the capabilities that are available from the marketing technology platforms that are out there. That being said, it will likely force some changes for brands to actually deliver a better customer experience. There are many times where we as digital marketers completely rely on third-party data for one-to-one bidding and not quite paying attention to where we're reaching the customer as long as we're reaching the right customer. But context obviously matters. So the consumer mindset at the time of the impression makes a big difference. This, I think, is going to make us focus on that more. Who we're targeting is, of course, important, but we need to get a lot more comfortable with where we're targeting them and kind of what the context around it. A quick and easy conversion is always great, but we need to start building those relationships as well, which is where the first party data comes through. And we need to really making a kind of holistic approach across the entire customer journey. Creating a reason for the customer to engage with your brand is going to be important. And then whether it's kind of retargeting or post login engagement, it's going to give you a lot more flexibility. It's going to be more expensive for brands. There's no way around it. But in the long term, we'll have better promoters, better brand equity, and more loyal customers.
Fantastic point, though, about relying too much on third-party data and not listening enough. So it's great. You said it better than I did. So Nancy, how about you?
So, I think the last thing you said, Natalie, is probably the most relevant. It's going to be more expensive, but your contacts are going to be far more efficient. And, it's kind of like focusing on those high potential to engage customers with the ones that have already contacted you or interacted with you in some way. So it's sort of, being able to grab the lowest hanging fruit, and, really trying to obtain direct permission by the customer and to interact with them, and frankly not blowing it once you get that permission.
Very good point.
So yeah, and at the end of the day, it's just going to the cost of acquisition is going to go up. That's just all. We have to just deal with that, figure out how to work around it. So
Yeah. It's speaking of not even workarounds, but when you're trying to juggle all that, obviously what's driving the conversation today is your customer experience, including from a digital and UX perspective. How do you go about, advice at least on how to create a great customer experience in the digital world? Nancy, give you this time.
So, really, I think, it's about creating an end-to-end experience. It's about engaging the customer or the prospect with relevant relevant content. And also just, continuing to build on that engagement, listen to the customer. Don't have a straight stream just because, that's what you built. You have to be dynamic in today's world. And I think more and more as we continue to have increased regulations, increased costs, the investment in that customization is going to be much more important and much more impactful as it relates to conversion. One size does not fit all. And, we all know that, and we say that, and then we go out, we start out with, well, let's just try this one way and see how it works. And then you're like, well, our conversions aren't so great. Well, now we have to start customizing it. And, I think that if you just kind of walk into that relationship with that mindset and, know your business, know what are the key pivotal points in that customer relationship. When is the next purchase cycle coming up? When is there competitive threats out there that you need to remind the customer why they do business with you, and how, I think most importantly at the end of the day, how do you add value in that relationship? And, it's not only adding value, but it's communicating and reinforcing that you've added value.
I just to add on that a little bit, because you made it exactly excellent points. This concept of personalized experience and an experience that is tailored to you is not just for the big guys, right? I think many of us are familiar with John Green's concept of liquid expectations, and that is completely true. We're not being measured against our competitors by our customers and the experience that we deliver. We're being measured against what the rest of the web and what the rest of the world has set. Amazon, Facebook, Google, if you think of kind of the Delta app and phone call and personal experience, this is what they're used to. And everything that falls short of that is completely rage inducing for the customer. There's a balance, right? There's the 80-20 principle. There's probably 20% of that experience that delivers 80% of the impact. So you don't need to recreate the entire, Facebook or Amazon infrastructure, but you need to understand that you're not getting measured against your competitors. You're getting measured against the rest of the world. There's probably some value, just to throw it out there, to the feel of the homegrown small local business. There's room for that in the right brand, but that needs to be very, very intentional. And that needs to make sure that this is part of the brand persona that you want to portray.
Nice John Green reference, by the way.
Thank you.
And I expect you guys to butt heads a little bit. You can't agree with her on everything. So we want some real tension, creativity, But let's talk about social media. So social media is in a fairly that this is not brand new anymore, except for club and maybe TikTok today with playing in a on a platform with an audience, whether it's you're talking about create great content and do it on a regular, correct frequency. Use it as some sort of service tool. You know, now we've got all the legislation going on around the sort of messenger platform interaction, but it social networks. How do you look at navigating?
Think the audio cut out a
A
little bit.
little bit. So
Yeah, I
what
think
was the
the
last
audio
thing
cut
I
out a
said?
little bit. If I'm understanding the question correctly, and please adjust if I'm not understanding. So with all of the elements that are coming into social media and the platforms that are enabled to do a wide variety of things, how do we use it? Right? What's the opportunity there?
Yeah.
Nancy, if you don't mind, I can give it a start.
Sure.
Can you hear me okay
this might
now?
be the point
Yes.
of contention.
Okay. Yeah, that's question.
Perfect. I think the biggest opportunity is to really work with the social media platforms rather than against them. These platforms are dumping in immense amounts of dollars to create something that is sticky, to engage the customers and keep them there for hours and hours on end. So if I, as a brand, am trying to use this platform as a tool to find the audience and then steal them off into my own digital experience, it's always going to be an uphill battle. It's always going to be an easier time creating engagement within the platforms themselves. And of course, platforms wanting my advertising dollars are trying to create things that will drive immediate conversions, immediate response, such as shoppable ads or the lead ads. That's not where it stops. That's not why the consumer is there. You have to be mindful of the customer intent and expectations, right? I'm not going to convince a customer to go research hearing aids when they're in the middle of a heated debate over who's the sexiest bachelor. It's just not going to work. So it goes back to the same concept of being mindful of the context of where we reach our audiences and using the tools provided by the platform rather than trying to pull them out of it, because it's always going to be more challenging and more expensive.
Nancy,
So
how about you?
I was hoping that we might have a little bit of contention and battle, but I totally agree with what you said. We do really need to be mindful of where the customer is and what they're trying to do within that place, right time, right place, right channel, right offer. And, I think every brand is different, and being in financial services, when somebody's playing around on Facebook and chatting with their friends and posting pictures, top of mind for them is not necessarily to get a loan, but it is a great place to give some aspirational ideas of what you can do with a loan, and build awareness of your brand. Whereas, if you're with another kind of brand, that might be more relevant to engage within the platform. But, I think also depending on what you're doing, you still need to maintain your brand equity, how you come across. And, me, creating a fun little, I don't know, Cosmo quiz about, what you want to do with your cash might be okay, but it really kind of treads on keeping the seriousness and the integrity of the brand.
Yeah.
So, it's a balance. It's definitely a balance. We have completely shifted our strategy as it relates to social after, several years of trying out different things and trying to make it really do something it wasn't meant to do. We're really focusing on the brand awareness, the servicing aspect. And COVID really changed for us how we use the platform. And we've really gone from trying to kind of prove it out as a really strong lead generator or whatnot, to bring in the business. Now it's just like, what, we want to build awareness, we want to get a lot of impressions, we want to build the brand, we want to be there to help facilitate and people want to learn more and want to understand more about how things work, how we can help them. And of course, for our existing customers, it's a place to go to hear about the local contests in the branch. Did they win the Easter egg counting contest? Or is it just to go ahead and find what the branch hours are? So I think it's about using the medium, being conscious of what the context is, and then what is most effective for your business. And it's not always, frankly, about lead gen.
So Nancy, a follow-up question, if I may, because this is one that we're still figuring out. The social media is a customer service tool. There's many cases where consumers will go to social media to very publicly ask questions because they want those questions to be public. But you're in a highly regulated industry. I'm in a highly regulated industry. There's a huge benefit to providing that customer service publicly, but there's very limited abilities for me to do so in a public manner. Have you figured out how to create that engagement and that virality with the existing customers in such a public forum?
No. Honestly, the risk is too big. When there are, we limit some of the interactions on the platform because or we'll pull them offline. Or we will direct to, here's a list of our frequently asked questions. We'll do something like that, but we don't, a lot of the times, frankly, our questions are very individual and they violate, any kind of regulations or privacy. You just can't. So
Okay.
I would say the way we address it is we take it offline. We send them to a link of commonly asked questions. Sometimes in our advertising, we'll take highly asked questions and we'll create some type of engagement around that. But it's not like something we do all the time. But if we monitor and we see that coming up on a fairly regular basis, we'll just sort of add it into the flow.
That's a great.
Large brands that are in this highly regulated industry, there are billions. Well, I mean numbers, tens of thousands of small businesses that also play that can't have these discussions. Much of the advice is always given, you got to turn your social media into Wendy's Twitter. And Wendy's Twitter for a lot of people. You did hear that, right?
Something when we got to Twitter, it cut out again.
Yeah.
So it's out when you think about social, so much of the advice is often given around turning into something similar to Wendy's Twitter, but you can't do that with a lot of companies. That there are a lot of relationships people have with companies similar to yours, and not everything can just be done in a fun and offline. I hear a lot of the advice about Clubhouse right now. You can't have deep of anything HIPAA related on Clubhouse without getting yourself into some massive trouble, especially when the servers are overseas. Work for large legacy brands. Nancy, what is your company's 80 years old? Mm-hmm. Roughly. Yeah. That isn't shock, but it's still loud enough and grab people's attention, which is very fleeting. You're competing with new brands and old and miracle new devices. How do you both sort of navigate through that? Since I addressed it to you, Nancy, first, but how do you really?
So, Kenneth, you're totally frozen, so I couldn't hear the question.
You didn't hear me?
I'm going to go ahead and guess if there's something around creating engaging content as a legacy brand, which I think actually is a nice follow-up to your comment about Wendy's Twitter. So how do you create that content that competes with a Wendy's Twitter as a legacy brand?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So basically and I'm sorry for all my devices are off and shut down. How that you can cut through the noise in today's world? You're both making a face like I've frozen again.
We lost a couple of words, but I think we got there.
Okay, go, Nancy. You
So since you got there, Natalie, I'm gonna let you go there first because it still cut out a little bit for me.
Okay. So the question, as I understand it, creating breakthrough content as a legacy brand that is on brand, and it's going to be kind of in theme with the rest of the conversation we were having today. Context matters, and customer expectations matter. There's a lot of value in topics that are semantic to your customer offering, right? Miracle-Ear specifically, we can talk about hearing aids and hearing health, and that's a very broad topic, content we create around it. But it's also not out of the realm of possibility for us to talk about overall health and wellness, and for us to talk about living fulfilling lives. So we focus on areas where we have a right to speak with authority and authenticity and develop content from there. There's also the opportunity of capitalizing on the conversations that are already happening. So a great example, you guys might remember, there was this internet meme going around about Laurel and Yanni, and half the population was hearing Laurel and half the population was hearing Yanni, and households were divided, and allegiances were made. There were huge conversations around what was happening. We joined that conversation organically because we had the authority to talk about how hearing actually works and why this was happening and why were people hearing different things. So making sure that you're looking and listening for those opportunities to join conversations where it's always going to be more authentic to join a conversation that's already happening than trying to build one up from scratch, but also making sure you're staying within your wheelhouse. I think, Nancy, you had a great example that doing a Cosmo quiz for a brand like us it's going to be completely out of the blue. It's going to look completely inauthentic, and it might generate some engagement, but it's not going to be the right type of engagement. So staying in the area where you can be authentic and authoritative and creating content from that standpoint.
By the way, I referenced Team Laurel and Team Yanni this morning. It was on a previous session. Yeah, it's a good time.
Perfect.
Nancy, how about you?
Yeah. So, our policy and our we're a privately held company, and we're, as such, there's things that we are very private about. And one of the things that we don't do, and it's very thoughtful in that way, is we do not engage with, conversations and things like that, just because we have too much of a risk. We are so highly regulated. It's just not, and it's not, frankly, within our brand DNA. We're a very personal brand. We're very one-to-one. We're very relationship oriented. You're not going to see, our brand in major consumer venues, and it's not the personality of the brand. It's very down home, old, relationship driven, heritage oriented, one-to-one. So it's not even in our brand personality to engage in a conversation like that.
All right. So next question. And I'm making sure you can hear me okay. Sorry for my internet connection issues. So I think I'm good so far. All right. What's an area? And I thought about this both as a marketer and then also as somebody that's a content planner for this series of conferences. What's an area of marketing that performs well for you, but you don't feel like it gets discussed nearly enough by experts, influencers, conference, et cetera? And if I think about it from a digital standpoint, let me put it this way: if I was thinking about it from a non-digital standpoint, I would brag all day long about direct mail twice on Sunday. From a digital perspective, I'll give you another example. We had a speaker here yesterday from Microsoft. Bing gets no love. It's the redheaded stepchild of the digital world, but it provides great incremental lift. So from your perspective, Natalie, how about you? What's one that you like that you wish we were talking about more?
I'm going to second your comment on direct mail. Direct mail, while incredibly kind of old school channel, it has really, really cool opportunities, can drive a response like nothing else. And when you think about all of the improvements that we're getting from data and data integrations, those are also applicable to direct mail. And there's some incredible personalization. There's incredible message sequencing and customer relationship that can be done with direct mail. But out of there into digital, which is where we're talking about today, my answer is really integrations. It's really, I don't hear enough about how the tools actually play together and what you do with them after you bought the tool. There's so many cool platforms out there that do incredible things, and then you spend money on it and you put it in place, and now what, right? That like kind of life after digital transformation conversation very rarely happens. None of that is a silver bullet. You always have to work it, and none of them can deliver any of that step change in a silo. So what I'd love to hear more is, how do you build that infrastructure? How do you stitch it together to make the data connect and actually be useful? The CEO of Invoca says, integrated data delivers automated results. I love that phrase because it could not be more true. The biggest breakthroughs come from when you join your different systems together into one and help them work with each other. So that would be mine.
Shout out to Greg. Nancy, you and I have never had a conversation about digital transformation. So that was a perfect setup.
Okay. Well, I'd say we're on the cusp of digital transformation. I've been in past organizations. We've certainly been well along the way. I do like the answer about integration, all the tools, all the bells and whistles. What's the bright, shiny object this week, and how do you integrate it? Because I do think a lot is lost within that process. With what we do, direct mail is direct mail's king. There's not a whole lot that you can do to beat direct mail. The other thing I would say that isn't talked about a lot, that I personally just have an affinity towards, is e-statement marketing. And monetizing your statement. And I'm going to say that's an online and an offline type of channel, but nobody ever talks about that. And if you think of the richness of the data that you see and that you can target off of in that customer relation, in that customer interaction, it is just rich with amazing opportunities to serve up very customized, high converting advertising. And you can get very complex very quickly, but that's exactly what we're talking about, is how do we automate in a way that we communicate with our customers that is the most relevant and really speaks to them and what's happening in that interaction. And it's so immediate and real time. So that would be mine.
I love that. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll never look at my e-statement the same way again.
All right.
So any concerns? I'm going to pull back and talk about one that just recently came out. We had the TCPA ruling as of recent about how marketers should look at social media platforms. Again, if you think about the ruling that just happened, 2-3 weeks ago, basically it nearly defined that social media platforms could be used because you weren't storing phone numbers. And I'm butchering it verbally completely, but that's the gist of it. Is that affecting you at all? Because you both work in environments that are not just purely e-commerce plays only. They are complex sales and need some interaction that involves calls. So, Natalie, I'll start with you.
Sure. It impacts us, but not specifically through the social media platform. Obviously, conversations with consumers and reaching out to our customers across the different channels is part of everything that we do. Also, as a marketer, I can probably justify many things to be of service to the customer and therefore not be promotional messaging. Despite the ruling and the interpretations, my justification is probably not going to be the same. And this is where I'm going to come back to focus on the customer, right? You need to be respectful of the customer's wishes and the customer's preferences and their intent. When they reach out to you through that particular channel, you have a pretty good guess of what they meant when they reached out to you. And just because somewhere in the fine print you had in the, it assumed disclaimer that you will be able to use this information for something else, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what the customer intended. And that's where you have to be very careful. Like I said, I think legislature in general is kind of far behind the functionality of the technology that we're using. So we're going to end up with these cases all over the place. What do we exactly mean when we say sell or use or data or automatically, right? These are terms that can be very, very broad. And as a marketer, I can define them one way, and my legal counsel is going to define it completely differently. Let's go back to what the customer really wanted while these things are going on. We have to pay attention. We have to look at the direction that it's going, but that trend is clearly pushing us towards respecting the customer and what the customer meant.
Nancy, how about you?
Well, I'll just say, from a business perspective, we're absolutely thrilled by the ruling. To have that level of clarity in the original sort of non-clarified form, there was, we're a bricks and mortar organization with over 325 branches, and each one of those branches has 4 to 5 phones in it, and each one of those phones can store a phone number from a functional perspective. That would have been, that just would have turned our business on its end. And most of our customers, we only have about a 30% email penetration rate. So the majority of our customer interactions are happening in person or on the phone. And, our branches day in and day out are constantly, they go through their queues and they call their customers about, what's coming up from a payment perspective, how can they help service them, et cetera. And, this ruling has been extremely helpful for us, but one of the things that I think that we need to be mindful of is, what is the customer preference? How do I want to be reminded about my payment coming up? And and then also, how does that conversation transition into something that is relevant for that customer, not just, I'm going to check off a box that says I need to try and sell something at this point. And I think that that's where, the devil is in the details. My chief compliance officer always says that, and it bugs me to no end, but he's right. The devil is in the details. And you have to, and especially in a regulated industry, like, you have to be very succinct about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and ensure that you're not breaking any of the regulations out there. And but it's also doing the right thing for the customer, and taking things in like preferences, et cetera. That makes it a huge difference if you're able to implement that within your infrastructure.
But it'll also give you a huge boost in the results as well, right? If you're respecting the customer, if you're taking into consideration their preferences, you're first of all going to stop wasting money reaching them where they don't want to be reached, but it also creates a better customer experience, more loyal customer that's more likely to engage with the conversation that you're having with them.
Absolutely. It's kind of like the conversation earlier. You're probably going to be able to touch less people, but the people you touch are going to convert at a much higher rate. So are you net the same as you were going to be to begin with? Maybe.
More efficient. Yeah. Well, and if you're sitting at home wondering what the hell we're talking about, because you don't eat up on Facebook TCPA cases, for afternoon reading, probably look up Facebook TCPA, just Google that, or Facebook versus, I think his name is Duguid, or it's Duguid. I'm not sure if I know how to pronounce it, but that's the case we're talking about. It's really sort of made a lot of commotion in the last few weeks in regards to performance marketing. So Nancy, let me start with you then and talk about, now that we're coming out of this pandemic, what advice do you give marketers today as to how they look at the various forms of digital marketing, and what have you learned in the last year when you were watching TikTok videos as opposed to to other times in the world when we were just blasting everybody with every banner ad we could, or email message, and so much else? Where do you sort of think of yourself coming out of the pandemic with your digital marketing and advertising?
Rule number 1, do not use 2020 as a baseline for any level of performance unless you're trying to evaluate what performance is going to look like in a pandemic. That would be rule number 1. Rule number 2, if you are in financial services, and specifically in the lending business, don't use the first half of 2021 as a gauge to track or forecast any type of experience. It's not a level playing field. When the government gives away money for free and you're trying to get people to borrow money, at an interest rate. So that would be my main lessons. But as marketers, the world has changed, and I would say rule number 3 is don't use 2019 as a baseline for forecasting, because the world will never be like 2019 again. So those would be my top 3 rules.
Well, one of the things, and I've probably told you this before, but the way I look at it in particular, and I'm going to cut off Nancy Natalie rather, the models everybody's been using have been broken, and if it does anything, it will help people stop just relying on historical data that is older data, as in a fiscal year old. Start looking at more real-time triggers as opposed to what happened a year ago and basing some judgments. And it's creating a world where the smarter marketers are really going to position themselves to think more in real time than just rely on historical models.
Well,
Natalie?
and I just before sorry, Natalie. I think the other thing to keep in mind is sometimes we just get too smart for our own good, and we don't look at business fundamentals. And there are fundamental things that you know about a business, and there's fundamental things that you know as a marketer with some level of variability. For an example, when a pandemic comes into play, you really don't know what to expect. But at the end of the day, it's a good or service or a product that somebody needs. You need to price it in a way that is, that is attractive to them. There, is messaging. You still need to build awareness. You still need to be in the consideration set. You still need to have the right messaging to do all of that to appeal to your target. And you still need to make that transaction easy, simple, fast, depending on your product, and provide quality good, right? No matter what that good is. So those are business fundamentals, and pandemic or not, those are just basic things. And if we as marketers and companies can follow those guidelines, you'll be successful.
I do, based on all of our conversation in terms of historical modeling, I do want to give a shout out to the CFOs out there that need to use something. And my marketing gut is not really enough for them to go on. So I understand that there's a requirement for that historical modeling, but same thing as you, 2020, that was not like anything else. Through the middle of 2019, we went through a digital transformation. So comparing to that is also not going to make any sense. And as a result, our new normal, which I know is a completely overused term, is going to change how those consumers behave. So like you said, Nancy, use your knowledge, use your basic understanding of your business, your basic understanding of your customer, but also understand your customer. How did the pandemic actually impact them? And you can use that to guide yourself how to relate to that customer, how to get yourself into that consideration set, and use that understanding to help drive some of your decisions. But as a big call out, don't use that to prey on them, right? There's a whole lot of emotions happening in general right now over many, many reasons. So as a result, playing on those emotions, yes, we always want to tug at the heartstrings. We want to talk about things that evoke emotions, but don't prey on our customers. The customers are they're sensitive. There's a lot going on that can go badly very, very quickly. The other part that goes to understanding your customer, I would encourage everybody to look at how did you do in 2020, and did you have the data that you needed to understand where you can cut and what you needed to keep? Because everybody was cutting budgets, right? Everybody was trying to maybe not Amazon, but everybody else was trying to figure out how to make things work. And if you didn't actually have the data that you needed to make precise decisions and intelligent decisions, then now's the time to start laying that foundation, that groundwork to get to the granular data that you need to set yourself up for the future.
So a question that I think also works in the pandemic, but when you think about marketing today, and a lot of it is having to be justified based on what a lot of people would have allowed for in the past, but now that we're in sort of leaner times, if you will, has to be thought of a little bit differently. Not everything that is emotions, as you just mentioned, can necessarily be justified to the CFO. So Nancy, do you think we're becoming too performance driven or campaign driven? You're the CMO. I mean, you see how your role is changing with so many CMOs becoming CROs or being replaced by CROs in the future. But at the same time, we're trying to create those emotional ties that really, some of the things that Natalie brought up. I love the Laurel example and how to lean into that. That had nothing to do with a campaign, but we're in such a different world right now when a lot of companies just really needing to keep their lights on as we emerge back out, especially in the small business world, and looking at how they need to attack a quarter or 6 months versus 10-year plan with their customers.
So, being an 80-year-old company, I think I have a very different perspective than perhaps somebody within a startup environment. What I'll say is time and time again, no matter what you see in terms of business trajectory, I mean, you're only going to get so much out of performance marketing, right? You're going to hit a ceiling of efficiency, and your brand and what we call today, like our organic traffic. If we shut off everything, we did absolutely nothing, this is the business that would come in. That's built by brand advertising, brand equity, being in your communities, establishing your relationships, getting your promoters, etc. And you don't get that by constantly hounding people with buy this, buy this, buy this. So, did the pandemic change? Actually, interestingly enough for us, some of like I mentioned for social, where we were really trying hard to kind of make that into a hardcore lead generator, and really it wasn't as effective as other channels. We've kind of just really flipped our strategy around to make it more of a branded servicing platform. So in essence, if I want to look, very directly at how my spend allocation is between brand and response, direct response, I would say we've probably increased our brand. Now, granted, we didn't have that much brand spending to begin with, but we had enough. So for us, we actually are spending more on that kind of servicing brand awareness. We probably still need to spend a little bit more, but we'll get there.
Well, and social is one of the best places to talk about. I mean, I know I have some really good friends who are speakers who their whole keynotes are built around get your ads out of our social. And that's a platform where everybody connects, but it also converts really well. Especially the Facebook ads, depending on what type of ads, they drive a lot of traffic. Natalie, how about you? How do you feel?
Product, right? It depends on your product.
Yeah.
And where the engagement is occurring, right?
Exactly. Natalie, how about you?
In agreement again. From the standpoint of Miracle-Ear, I mean, hearing aids are not things you buy on a whim, and there's only so much opportunity there is for you to skim the people off the top that just happen to be at the right point in time to make a decision, take action on their hearing loss. In most cases, they've been going through symptoms of hearing loss for years and just now happen to want to do something about it. You're going to be just as lucky trying to find them as any one of your competitors. So filling that funnel, right? Engaging with that customer throughout their entire journey, positioning yourself as a voice of support, as a voice of authority, as a thought leader, and as a trusted brand throughout that journey that's how we set ourselves up. I mean, even as a very basic concept of needing to fill that retargeting pool, right? Your conversion audiences are going to be a whole lot more efficient if you have a strong retargeting pool. You need to look at that investment holistically. That being said, we all have CFOs who really like to understand what our cost per acquisition is. As we look at that, we need to make sure that we're understanding it kind of holistically, but we also need to know how high is up in those conversion audiences. Because those conversion audiences, especially on social and especially in the digital world, can be huge. So it's a balance. We need to make sure that we're maximizing it where there is room, but it can't be 100% conversion. Otherwise, you're shooting yourself in the foot for the following years.
Yes, but it's very hard to quantify it to a CFO, cost per heartstring. It just will not work. So, and it's one that we're not going to bring up. So another question for you. really, and I'll start with you, Natalie. How do you look at helping lead your team? You know, driving this is we're in a different world with even leadership, just making certain that we move people in the direction we want to move. Because not only is all your customers have gone through a hell of a year, uh, we and your team are humans that have gone through that year too. And that's the type of engagement you get with them on social, the type of performance you get now that you're managing everybody at home. It's a lot different. So Natalie, how are you trying to balance that today?
Fantastic question. And I don't think there's a simple answer. Our company culture is very performance oriented, and the teams that we have tend to be very self motivated and self driven. And as a result, in a year like 2020, you get a lot of people who are exhausted, all caps, exclamation point, exhausted. And this is where humanity comes into play, and just being honest and real about the fact that, guys, this is hard. I'm tired. I know it's my job to put on a big smile and kind of inspire
Yeah.
you guys, but it's okay to be tired, to make sure you're taking care of yourselves. But the other part that, again, engages the type of culture that we have in our organization is the ability for ownership and the ability for everybody to be kind of their own general manager. This is not necessarily to say that there's no governance and there's no oversight. Of course, highly regulated industry, you can't do that. But the expectation that even somebody who is a kind of deep specialist of their own specific digital channel needs to have some sort of understanding of how that channel impacts the integrated marketing campaign or the overall infrastructure of how it goes, or the point of the customer journey that they happen to be affecting. That's the expectation that we have within our team. And as a result, that ends up creating a lot more engagement and forces a lot more interaction between people, so that even those that happen to have a role that is very deep, I'm looking at my spreadsheet for 20 hours on end, those are the people that still have to have that human interaction, which makes a year like 2020 a lot more bearable when you have that human interaction.
Sure. Nancy, how about you?
Well, I would say 2020, just culturally for my organization, was a major shift. The organization was very much a face-to-face culture. I had not come from a background like that, so it was going back to sort of an old way of operating for me as a leader, I would say. And you kind of stole my words, so I'm not happy about it. But I would say the key philosophy is be human. Be human as a leader. Recognize what's happening, in the world, what's happening. There's so many personal struggles with combining, family and home and work. Everybody wants to do a good job. There's not a lack of motivation there. They all want to do a good job. They all want to be successful. They all want to help the company. It's about being human and empowerment. Lead yourself. Come with, if you have questions or concerns and you need help, I'm human, I'm here for you, but don't, this is work. At the end of the day, it's about family and it's about community. And if you aren't happy there, and if you're not content there, and if you're stressed there, you're not going to do well in work. So let's just be human and remember all of that.
Where's the
And
dog?
I think it's what
That makes this human again. Where's the dog? Because last
he's
time
not
we
barking
were
right now. I
yeah,
know.
exactly. And that's the normal world. Well, first of all, we got to stop saying 2020. Hindsight to me is now 2019. It just sounds better to not bring it up anymore. So this has been fantastic. Thank you both. I'm hoping to see you both in person at DigiMarcon events next year, back when we're all out on the road on a regular basis. I'll probably run into you, Nancy, in Jupiter, Florida, when I go on a shark dive, since you're
Great.
down there with your husband all the time. But definitely been great, and appreciate all your time. So you guys have a great day.